Well, we're in the last verses of chapter 14 of Mark. And you do remember that Peter had very bravely, at least in words, said that, all others will abandon you. I will never abandon you. I will die along with you. And then his pants caught on fire.
Except they didn't have pants.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess his robe caught fire.
Yeah. Do you guys know the definition of kangaroo court?
Yeah. No.
It's not an Australian thing. No one seems to know the origin of the term for sure, but the definition is pretty clear. During the days of little or no law and order, if a group of men wanted to eliminate someone they didn't care for, whether maybe they were a horse thief, and if you stole a horse, the penalty was to be hung. They would grab a rope and fashion a noose and hang him from the nearest appropriate tree branch. No trial, just an execution. Then there was an unofficial trial, with little or no regard for the law. These trials came to be known as kangaroo courts. If people waited for the judge to arrive, and quite often if you lived in a small town, you had a circuit judge that would ride from the larger city, and when he heard that there was something that he needed to be a judge for, he would travel to on the stage or whatever usually, and he would go into that town, and he would go through the process. And you select a jury and so on. But if you were waiting that long for the horse thief, there was no telling what the outcome might be. Lynching, which is what the term came to be called, where you grabbed a rope and said, "Come on, boys, let's lynch them." Lynching, string them up. Lynchings were quicker, even though the wrong person was hung occasionally. We know that same kind of thing still goes on today. The religious leaders of the day were so zealous and filled with hate for Jesus. Now, you can be zealous for a wrong cause as well as a good cause. That they hadn't really thought all this through. They hated Jesus so much. I'm sure somebody said, well, okay, we hate him. We want him to die, which is the ultimate way to shut him up. But what do we do once we catch him? You have to kind of plan all this through. After they had arrested him, then what? It was against Jewish law to have a nighttime trial. I would say that would be true. Well, they have night court, don't they?
Yeah,
Only on TV.
Yeah.
you've seen it on TV, right?
as seen on TV. But it was against Jewish law to have a nighttime trial. But they were afraid to have a spectacle during the day where the common people would see. Why did they not want to have a spectacle where the common people could see what they were doing?
They're afraid they'd riot.
Yeah, because they were railroading him. I think everybody knew that he had done nothing wrong. He'd been nothing but the voice of love and peace. And so they knew the religious leaders were jealous of him. And so so this was going to be their moment to revel in their success. In spite of the law, they were already already interrogating Jesus, and the beatings had already begun. So let's see where we're at in terms of 66. I don't know when they did away with Route 66, but I was really unhappy about that.
Going about the show or the highway?
Well, the highway, but, I
Yeah,
had,
there's still a route.
It goes, yeah, it goes through.
but isn't it called something else?
No.
No,
Really?
Yeah.
Well, see?
they thought it was really popular, so they brought it back to
Oh,
the
well, good, it
original
was very
form.
popular.
I think they had some protests.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, I think there was parts of it that were not drivable or something, and then they redid it or
They fixed
whatever.
it.
Okay. All right, I digress. I
You
should
digress.
have never
See
done
what
it.
you did?
It's all on me.
Moving right along.
Verse 66. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the courtyard of Caiaphas the high priest. So they arrested him in the Mount of Olives. They brought him down across the Kidron Valley and then up the steps to Caiaphas's house. And they have a courtyard. They have a wall around with a gate and an inner courtyard and then the house. In this case, a 2-story house. So while Peter was below in the courtyard, because he had followed them over, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself by the fire, had kind of a metal device it held. They called it a charcoal fire, so it was a wood fire. She looked closely at him. You also were with that Nazarene Jesus, she said, but he denied it. I don't know or understand, now this is Peter speaking, what you're talking about, he said. And he went out into the entryway. Probably went out toward the gate. When the servant girl saw him there, she said, again, to those standing around, "This fellow is one of them." Again, he denied it. I don't know whether they just thought that, or Peter, I guess he was afraid he was going to get arrested. I don't know. So here's Jesus in the upper story of Caiaphas' house, and they're questioning him, and they're trying to get him to say something, and he's not saying anything. And so they're spitting on him, they're punching him in the face, they're doing everything they can do. Their anger, I guess, coming out. Plus, he wasn't the person that was going to fight back. And because he was not going to fight back, he kind of became like the kid on the playground who didn't fight back when the bullies were bullying him. They just keep using him as a punching bag. And then I think that's exactly what was going on here. So while they were doing the beating upstairs, this other drama is happening downstairs, which is also going to be a fulfillment of prophecy, because Jesus had prophesied, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me." So Peter followed Jesus into this place, and he was keeping his distance while he was warming himself by the fire. 2 times he's had this servant, his 2 servant girls or whatever say, "You were with him. I recognize it was common in Jewish law for there to be a formal legal denial. Well, it's kind of that way in court today. They'll say, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty? And it was pretty common for him to deny. It's better to say, no, I didn't do it, or no, I wasn't there, or no, I didn't know the guy. Or maybe Peter was suffering from short-term memory loss. I don't think so, though. I think he knew exactly. I don't think he remembered Jesus' words, though. Because he had said, even though the others will abandon you, I'll never abandon you. Imagine being from a city in the northern area of America and visiting the deep south. Would you notice a pronounced accent of the people there? If you're going to Alabama, Mississippi, in the deep south. If you were from Boston, they would probably notice your accent. Even though my daughter-in-law says that they don't have an accent.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Only Hawaiians don't have accent.
Well, Peter was from Galilee, or what they would say from the Galilee. The Sea of Galilee, and out of the bottom of the Sea of Galilee is the beginnings of the Jordan River and flowing down, eventually going into the Dead Sea. So if he was from the Galilee, he was viewed, and a fisherman, that was, I don't know what other trade you could have. I guess there might have been some other trades. But it was basically being a fisherman. And he had fished, and his accent was very noticeable to someone from the big city, from Jerusalem. So for that reason, he gets caught again. After a while, this is verse 70. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, "Surely you're one of them, for you are a Galilean." And other gospels say, your accent or your language betrays you.
So that means he was talking, right?
Yeah, he was talking.
It's kind of like me saying I'm not from Texas.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
What? Texas accent?
71, he began to call down curses on himself, and he swore to them, "I don't know this man that you're talking about." Then what happens? Immediately, the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times." And he broke down and wept. It is it's really important to don't speak before you think. Don't put your mouth in gear until your brain is engaged, kind of thing. And that's exactly what was going on here. There is a kind of I guess a sense of pride that made Peter brag to Jesus that no matter what, I'll never betray you. I'll never do any of this.
You probably believed that's.
Yeah.
Oh, I
think.
Sure. I'm sure that would have been the case if somebody would have come up funny thing happens that when you're not on your own turf, when you're in the courtyard, inner courtyard, and you're in the belly of the beast, so to speak, and the enemy's surrounding you, the fact that you're going to speak up and say something in defense of the fact that you're a follower. Yes, I follow Jesus. And of course, we know that Jesus had great plans for Peter, and this was part of, we got to get past this point. You've got to learn from this. Of course, I don't know. Who knows whether he ever did learn from it or not? Because I think that was pretty bred into him. We know that pride comes before the fall, and there's certainly a time when, if you let your pride take control of your life, then it's going to amount to your downfall. There's one good thing about Peter's experience that we can glean, and that is that although we fall, when we observe this, we read this, though we backslide, or we fall, or we say something that we wish we hadn't said, Jesus will always be there for us. He is wounded now, but soon he will receive God's grace and forgiveness. That would be Peter. He was hardly a perfect man, and none of us on this earth are. But he would be highly used in the kingdom. And you can only let your imagination go to wonder when the kingdom of God is established physically here on earth, what people like Paul and Peter and Daniel and David are going to be used, as well as us. Okay, I'm going to keep it short. Aren't you guys?